And at one point we were talking about his behavior, and he had one of the themes in his feedback from my 360 was that he did not tolerate mistakes. If he caught you making a mistake, it was over, and we talked about that, and he said, well, my boss tells me that I'm responsible for the 5,000 paychecks. So I take that mean that there's no room for errors. And I remember writing it down, and that quote appears in a slide from one of my presentations because it was so just profound that weirdly and ironically, he actually cared very much about all 5,000 people that worked at this company. And so I wonder if that was where Steve Jobs was coming from. Not only are we, he probably was coming from a place of like being a crusader, like we are changing the way humans function. And that is, I can't imagine being in that position, or the people at Google, it's like, you're literally changing the human race. And so he probably was coming from that place. He wasn't, I don't find with the people that I coach that they're like, I'm so excited to make people cry and I love it. It's not that. They're focused on results for the team and the organization themselves. So I wonder if that's what Steve Jobs was on a crusade for good, ironically.
It goes back to that point before too, where it's like, it's so easy for our minds, particularly in that case, where like you have a really good reason to believe, like I cannot tolerate mistakes. I'm responsible for 5,000 people's paychecks. All the more reason when it seems so clear and certain to you of like, yeah, this is the way I have to be. That's the time to be like, hold on, let me ask a question here. Like, is this possible? Like, because I think you're so right. Like particularly people in leadership positions like that, they have so much that they can rely on to say like, people don't understand. The moral obligation is so high. And I often say it, and I think it's true. Like it's people like that. It's people that think they have like the moral high ground or righteousness on their side that can do the most damage. Exactly. Not because they're evil, not because they want to hurt people, but because they allow that certainty into their mind, which is like, I don't need to question anymore. I don't have to learn. I don't have to embody this value. And to me, that's the most dangerous thing you could do.
That's a great point. Yeah. As soon as you're certain about something, especially when it comes to relationships, then you're probably very wrong. Yeah. Certainty is the enemy.
Yeah.
And that's what the people I coach, that's what I come across is they're certain that their way works because they've seen the results. So why would they think it's not working? It's showing it does work. They are highly valued. They're getting results and all of that. Yeah, coaching is fascinating. I love doing it.
Yeah. Well, let me ask, what got you into it? Like why coaching, but maybe more importantly, why this type of coaching? The toxic workplace, the bullying. What was the impetus for that?
So I worked at an organization as a director of HR, and another director was a bully, I would say. And I started getting my master's degree while I worked there. And my master's and bachelor's are both in human communication. So I had my very first semester, I had a class called The Dark Side of Human Communication. And that class was about the communication that goes on in domestic violence and sibling rivalry and the dark ways that we communicate. And so, of course, I had to write a paper on something dark. And so I thought, I was fascinated by this person. And I was also fascinated by the fact that there were 49 people working there who allowed him to act that way. Not one person really would speak up. And so that was kind of ignited it. And then I came across the phrase workplace bullying while I was doing that paper, and I just was hooked. And I've been researching and studying that topic ever since. And it's fascinating. One of the things I was so fascinated was that as gray area as human behavior is, workplace bullying tends to unfold in almost the same way every time. And so it's weird that it's a human phenomenon. There should be no answer, right? But there is it's like just the pattern is the same. And that fascinates me.
Is it just, and I don't say this negatively, because in many ways it's me too, like, is it just intellectual though? Is it just like, this is a fascinating topic, it's super interesting how people are? Or is it deeper? Like, is there, maybe you already answered it. Does it go back to that moral obligation that says, if I know this is happening and I have some ability to fix it, I need to do my part? And that's also part of why you got into this?
Yeah, I'm passionate about everyone's responsibility to show care for each other because I was at the receiving end of not being shown care and I know what kind of damage it caused. And I often feel like, based on the stories I've heard over the years, my version was a pretty light story. He wasn't that bad when I hear other stories. And it still really bothered me so much for being in this kind of bullying light situation. And lots of research shows that people can develop PTSD from being bullied or harassed at work. And so I'm passionate about it because I know what it can do to someone. So I am lucky to be in a place where I get to have a company where I get to do something I'm passionate about every day. I also want to be clear, it's not like the goal isn't kumbaya, everybody comes to work and sings and holds hands. It's not that. Part of a respectful work environment is the ability to have discourse and disagree and talk about it. But to talk about it in a way that feels safe and where you can have open dialogue about different things. So, just to be clear, it's not like everybody should be rainbows and unicorns.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's interesting, because there is a level of subjectivity to it, even in the word safe, just to take that word. People's definition of what safe is, what behaviors are acceptable. How do you think about that? Is there an objective view of it to say, here is what safe looks like, here are the activities or the actions that are okay and aren't? Or does it depend on the workplace? Does it depend on the individuals?
Yeah, well, so part of organizational culture and the work that I do is let's define some of these words together, and professionalism is a good example. I've been reading a lot lately on that word. Lots of people feel it's a very white construct type of a word, professionalism. Your hair is supposed to be a certain way. You're supposed to dress a certain way. Your English is supposed to come out in a certain way. Well, who decided that this kind of English is professional and this kind of English is not? So it's a lot of those types of conversations where it's like, well, let's talk about what that word even means here. Because what's professional in a construction site is very different than what's professional at a law office, right? So every organization is going to have different definitions. So that's part of our job, is to help them take a look at those words and figure out, what does that mean here? And what does it look like when someone is being professional here in this workplace?